How's it going, guys? Welcome back to our first episode on how to code PHP. Now, before we get into the actual coding part, I really quickly want to talk about what exactly PHP is and what you can use it for inside a website. So right now, since you guys are already here and you're ready to learn about PHP, I want to mention that it's really important that you already know HTML and CSS. If you don't know HTML and CSS, it's going to be a little bit difficult for you to follow along on some of these lessons. So if you don't know it, go ahead and go back, learn about it first, and then return to our PHP lessons here. Now, having said this, a lot of people are also going to tell you that you need to know JavaScript before learning PHP. Now, while it's true that learning JavaScript makes it easier to understand PHP in the beginning, it also goes the other way around. If you learn PHP first and then learn JavaScript, it also becomes easier to understand JavaScript. So you don't need to know JavaScript before getting into PHP. The minimum requirement is that you know HTML and CSS. So now that we talked about what you need to know before getting into PHP, let's actually talk about what PHP actually is. As you guys can see, I did actually write on my screen here, the PHP stands for Hypertext Preprocessor. And essentially what PHP is what we call a backend programming language, or what you might call a server-side programming language. So what you can do with PHP is you can make your website more dynamic. Right now, if you were to only know HTML and CSS, you could create a website where you can go ahead and click on a couple of links and read about stuff, maybe put a video in there or some images. But what if you want to make it more dynamic and make users able to do something on your website? Let's say I want to, for example, have a login system where people can go and sign up, a user account. And with that user account, when they do log in, they can go to a forum, which you might also have on your website, and post something. Now, in order to have this, you're going to need to have a database. And a database is used for posting, or at least storing, all these posts and users that might be signing up on your website. So if you don't have a database, you can't save any information on your website. Now, in order to connect the website to the database, you're going to need a server-side language. And there's a lot of them out there, and the one we're going to be focusing on is the one called PHP. Now, PHP is the same thing WordPress is written in. It's also the same thing that Facebook uses, and it's an awesome tool when you get started on, learning server-side languages. So it's not one of the difficult ones. Now, what you can do with PHP, like I said, is you can make your website more dynamic. You can also insert stuff into databases. You can get stuff from databases. You can, create cookies. You can create sessions, which you use when you do actually log in on a website. You can do a bunch of awesome stuff, and it doesn't always have to be something related to a database. You can also do stuff on your website not connected to a database, but you need to have at least server access when you do something with PHP, which we'll talk about in the next couple of lessons, because we do actually need to set up a local server on our computer before we can use PHP, and it's really easy to do. It's not it's not difficult at all. So in the next couple of lessons, we'll talk about how to actually set up the local database. I just want to mention that PHP can, for some people in the beginning, be a little bit difficult to learn. And the reason it might be a little bit difficult, and the same thing goes for JavaScript. JavaScript and PHP are very different. The concept behind them are very different from HTML and CSS. That's because you need to think about coding in a little bit different way than you would with HTML and CSS. So don't get stressed or frustrated if you don't quite get PHP in the beginning, because everyone who starts learning PHP will in the beginning feel like they're learning a bunch of stuff which doesn't really make sense in the beginning. But later on, I promise, it's going to make a lot of sense. And just keep following the lessons and you will understand PHP in no time. So now that we talked a bit about PHP, what it can actually do and that sort of thing, I just really quickly want to mention the actual process of creating a PHP document. When you have a PHP document, if I were to actually go ahead and save this empty file I have here as something.php, we can actually go ahead and write both HTML code, JavaScript code, jQuery, XML. We can do a bunch of different code inside our PHP file, which is actually why a lot of times later on when programmers, after they learn PHP, you don't really see them creating HTML files anymore. They're always going to be creating PHP files and just writing the HTML inside the PHP files. So I just want to put it out there. You shouldn't get frustrated if you don't quite understand in the beginning. Everyone has it like that in the beginning. So as we do it later on and we move further in these lessons, you will learn, PHP and become familiar with it. And it's going to come as a second nature if you do actually practice it. So I hope you guys will enjoy these lessons. I don't really have anything else to talk about when it comes to introducing PHP. I think I did actually cover most of it. So, like I said, in the next couple of episodes, we will actually learn how to set up the local server, and then we'll actually get into PHP. So I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you guys next time.